Thanks for checking out my video. I collect high-end designer goods, whether that's shoes or bags or jewelry, accessories, and I thought I'll make a video which is an honest review about 5 luxury shoe brands, mainly heels. So the 5 brands are Jimmy Choo, Louboutin, Valentino, Gianvito Rossi, and Sophia Webster. So I'm going to be looking at 5 key areas, which are comfort, quality, sizing, style, and cost. I'm going to finish off with summary and recommendations, and this video will be quite long, so if you're not interested in any parts, please just skip it. And finally, I really hope this video will be useful to you, whether you're purchasing your first designer shoe or you've got a massive collection. So yeah, let's get started. I think the best way to start is with comfort, and that's because comfort is the make or break. No matter how much you love a shoe, no matter how much you paid for it, you are not going to wear it if it is just insanely uncomfortable. So before I rate my shoes 1 to 5, I want to just say that I've generally found when you wear high-end designer shoes compared to your average branded shoe, you don't get blisters. Your foot flesh will get sore, but there's no other extreme points of stress on your skin, and that's probably because of the higher quality of leather and materials, sole, etc. Now, with 1 being extremely uncomfortable, why did you buy these shoes, to 5 being awesome, feels like sport shoes, the 5 rating would really go to Jimmy Choo. They really do live up to the reputation they have. And again, before I get into the specifics, I just want to have a quick disclaimer, and that is I own 5 brands, I own 1 type of shoe from each brand, and so my experience of a shoe being comfortable or uncomfortable will really differ depending on what type of shoe model that you get. These are the Jimmy Choos, and they are the platform Nude Patent Dahlia model. So these were my first ever pair, and the reason why I chose them was because they were my wedding shoes. And so after hearing that Jimmy Choo are so comfortable, I thought, well, it's the best place to start. Now, the arch is very modest. You don't feel like you're straining your foot. The platform is 2.5 centimeters, which is really quite generous. You need about a week to actually stretch these shoes. Or actually, let's say this. After 1 week, they're no longer tight and they're comfortable. And then if you don't size it correctly, another week after, your 2nd week, it will actually stretch further. So really keep in mind just how much these shoes will move. Now, for maximum comfort, I chose platform. I also chose peep toe. And that's because I just felt like it gave my foot extra room to stretch the shoe, to let the shoe mold to my foot shape. And it really did work for me. So I know a lot of people don't like peep toe, but from a strategic point of view, it can actually be quite useful. So to date, I have worn these shoes for 2 very large occasions, both being about 12 hours, my hens and my wedding day. Now, hens, 0 pain. It just felt like I was in sexy sports shoes. I wasn't even thinking about my feet because that's how comfortable they were. Now, on my wedding day, which started at 11 a.m, about 6 hours later, 5 p.m, was the first time I didn't feel comfortable. And that was at the end of a 3-hour location shoot where we were largely standing the whole time. And I had been balancing on a sandstone block for about a solid 15 minutes. And you probably already know this. The worst discomfort in high heels comes from the type of surface you're on. The harder it is, the bumpier it is, that's just not good. So that's how much it took to bring out discomfort in my Jimmy Choos. So I really think they're quite incredible. I think that you can get a solid 6 to 8 hours out of these shoes. Of course, not walking the entire time, but if you're walking about 50 to maximum 70% of that time, I think you can last 6 hours. That's with the platform. So now to head to the other end of the spectrum, also very well-known shoes, strong reputation, but known for being uncomfortable, are the lovely Louboutins. So I decided after my amazing success with the Jimmy Choos that I would apply the same logic. I would get them as these platform peep toe. This style is called Very Prive, Very Prive. I bought these in London and the sales assistant told me to spend one solid week breaking into them before I attempt to wear them anyway. Now, when someone who's really experienced gives you good advice, what do? You obviously don't listen, because I was on my honeymoon and I thought, you know what, Jeff and I, we're going to a really nice 2-star Michelin restaurant in Berlin. I'm going to wear these shoes because they're going to look great. And so I padded my way to the restaurant in thongs, which is pretty ugly but very Australian. And the moment we were standing across the road from the restaurant, I slipped into these. So all I had to do was cross the road, walk through the lobby, walk down the corridor to the restaurant and just sit down. And sitting at the table, I wasn't even resting weight on my feet. I was bending my legs back, just letting my feet just hang off the chair. And after about 40 minutes, I couldn't stand these shoes. It felt like someone had set fire to my toes. It felt like Chinese foot binding, and I just had to remove them, and I sat at the table barefooted. So if I just take a break from my little story, if I was to rate these shoes 1 to 5, again 1 being just unbelievably uncomfortable, they started at a 1. It was pain I've never felt, but the good news is that after sticking with them and just being patient, breaking them in over about a 2-week period, they're more about a 4 now. You know, not super comfortable, but tolerable. Alright, so back to how I conquered these shoes. Essentially, it took me 2 weeks to break into them because in your first week, you just cannot wear them. I would have them on for 5 minutes, maximum 10, and you just ask yourself, why are you doing this to yourself? And I had socks on, all that padding going on. But by the end of the first week, they're tolerable. You can maybe keep them on for half an hour. And into my second week, I could keep them on for an hour, and that's when I was brave enough to wear them to a wedding. So I wore them at the wedding for 6 hours. They got uncomfortable at about 3, but that's because I was standing and walking a lot. There weren't many seats. I did dancing in them, and I found that as long as you sit down, you take a breather for about 5 to 10 minutes, when you're back on your feet, the pain sort of resets. So at the end of the day, if you have an event and you want to wear these shoes with the platform, with possibly a peep toe, you could last 3 hours in them without being in unbearable pain. You can drag that out if you want to. Now, just 2 things I want to clarify. I actually bought these shoes ridiculously tight. Like every millimeter of this shoe was crammed with my foot flesh. There was no room at all. So that's probably what added to the insane amount of pain. But when I get to sizing, I'm actually going to explain that you probably need to do that. It's just a rite of passage. The other reason why it took me 2 weeks to break into this shoe is I work from home. I'm sitting at my computer, my desk, 8 hours, 10 hours a day. So even though I'm breaking into them, there's no real weight. I'm just wearing them when I'm seated. So I think it's a slower breaking into them process. So on to another very well-known shoe, and that's the Valentinos. This model is the famous Rockstud with patent leather. I have to admit, I was actually a little bit disappointed in them. I had read online that they are ridiculously comfortable. I do find when you first put them on, they feel like a 5. They're really light, they cling to your feet like a second skin, you barely notice them. But then towards the 3-hour mark, it really sort of degenerates. I would put them at a 2 by that time frame. I would like to clarify that I needed no time at all breaking into these. Maybe it's because they're so strappy, or that pointed heel gives you a little bit more room to work with. They just fit. I didn't feel like it was too tight anywhere else. Maybe it pinched a little bit on my fifth toe, but it wasn't a deal breaker. But the other factor to keep in mind is, of all my 5 shoes, this was the only pair I bought mint condition secondhand. So maybe there is a difference having someone else walk around a little bit in your shoes. Now on to 2 brands which are slightly less well known. The first being Gianvito Rossi. The Italians always get it right. In my opinion, this is my favorite shoe. I think it's gorgeously crafted. This is 100 millimeters, 4 inches. It's called Plexi, and it's been designed with the contrasting leather at the heel and the toe with transparent PVC in the middle. So I have a lot to say about this shoe. I'll cover it under the style section. In terms of comfort, well, I found that first of all, you didn't really need to break into these. Maybe it's that PVC material, and it's also because I made a sizing mistake, but they're ready to go. In terms of comfort, these shoes are not invincible. They have a thin leather sole, they have some padding but not that much under the heel. So I wore them to a friend's wedding for about 8 hours. I could last that entire time, but the pain did settle in pretty quickly, maybe after the 2-hour mark. We were walking, we were standing a lot. If I were to rate this shoe, I would say it starts at a 4 in terms of comfort, and pretty quickly, faster than the Valentinos, they become a 3. So at the end of the day, if you just take a breather, you sit down for 5-10 minutes and you're back on your feet again, the pain resets, you're ready to go. But to be comfortable in these shoes, it's again maybe the 4-hour mark or so. We're almost at the end of the first section. So the last brand, which is also less well known in the Australian market, is Sophia Webster. This style is the Evangeline Angel Wing. It is 100 millimeters and 4 inches. There's a lot to say about these shoes, which I will tackle under style. It was actually my husband who fell in love with them and said we were not leaving London without them. So thank you, Jeff, for gifting me these shoes. Now, again, at the end of the day, the logic's pretty simple. If you don't have a platform cushioning base at the bottom of the bones in your feet, you are really looking towards the 2 to 3 hour mark, 4-hour mark most, if your shoe really is a bit more comfortable. So with these, I would say in terms of the rating, they start at a 3. They're really not that great, and they degenerate down to a 2 pretty quickly. I wore them for a friend's birthday dinner for about 3 hours, and even though I was seated most of the time and did a little bit of walking, you just feel everything ramming up against your foot when you're walking. So they are gorgeous, but in terms of practicality, next to the Louboutins when I first wore them, they're probably at the bottom of the scale. So in terms of quality, let's start with Jimmy Choo, since it was my first shoe purchase. I also feel like it does set the benchmark pretty high in terms of what level of quality you're expecting with the price that you're paying for. I think there are a lot of really lovely details on this shoe, even though it's so classic and simple. There's a fair amount of padding on the heel and on the arch, which is always good for you. One really questionable element in terms of quality is that Jimmy Choo, by default, they nominate a lovely cream suede leather as the sole. And just imagine yourself walking on suede on concrete pavements. It's going to get destroyed. Like, this is the way my heels look already after wearing them for 2 big events. Now, I read on some forums that if you want to preserve that, you will actually get a new sole applied to the base of this shoe before you even wear it out. Unfortunately, I did not read that when I received these, and I guess when you've spent so much already, you expect the shoes ready to go. So at some point in the future, when I need to get these shoes resold, I will probably tell you a bit more about that process, how much it costs, how long it's going to take when I get to that point. So onto the Louboutins. While we're talking about the soles, the Louboutins are painted red, which apparently, from what a storekeeper told me, it should be a cheaper process to get that fixed over the years. I can confirm that in the future when I do need to get it resold. What is still a bit disappointing, even though they have a more durable just leather sole, it's treated differently. It's definitely more hard wearing than the Jimmy Choo suede, is that still, I've worn this out for one major event and you can already see that the white is coming through. Of course, every storekeeper will tell you that's going to happen and you know it, but to see the red wearing away after one real event, it's much faster than I expected, I suppose. The padding is very much suitable, generous. What is surprising though, and I don't know how it happened, is I actually managed to chip the edge of the heel. So I'm hoping that's not an indication of it being weaker than what I would have thought. The other item is that these heels are ridiculously narrow. I've been told when I spoke to the storekeeper in Sydney's store that if you put too much pressure on that heel, it can very easily snap. Which again, when you're paying that much for a designer heel, I'm pretty surprised that that's something which is almost normal. So with the Valentinos, they're patent leather as well as my black Louboutins and my nude Jimmy Choos, but it's the only one I've actually managed to mark. I'm hoping that's not a sign that this shoe is lesser quality. I'm hoping it's just because I'm a bit of an idiot and I don't wear pointed toes much, so sometimes I just don't realize it comes out that extra few centimeters. So hopefully you can see it in this photo. It is quite a reflective surface which helps to disguise it. I have read online that really popular items like the iconic Rockstud, they've started to cut costs because people are still buying it no matter what price they put it up for. Online there have been issues about these little embellishments falling off or rusting. I haven't had any of those issues. I will keep an eye on that. When I did get it, as I mentioned, it was secondhand mint condition. There was only one sign of use on this shoe. Even the sole was pure perfection, which it isn't anymore because I've worn it out. But there was just a little bit of scruff marks at the bottom, at the back of the heel. So, however, if that gives an indication of the leather being quite fragile, I'm going to have to keep an eye on it. With the Gianvito Rossis, as mentioned before, it's a beautifully detailed shoe. I love the way they wrap the leather and they tuck it back into just above the sole and how the different materials meet. What's interesting is they have two little air holes on the side, which is actually quite essential to the shoe. When I wore them, it was 25 degrees, it was really hot, and little white condensation was forming as a result, so you really have to get rid of that moisture. This shoe is actually higher maintenance than I expected. Like with any shoe, little bits of grit and dirt and dried sweat accumulate inside, but with this shoe, first of all, it's clear, so you see all of it when it sticks to the surface, but secondly, it kind of gets stuck in the crack. There's that overlap of material on the side profile means that that's where a lot of the nasty little things will sit. So if you want to put this shoe on display or your friends are going to look at it closely, you probably have to spend time cleaning it. I've only really worn it for one big event, and the seam at the back near the heel is already undoing itself. So I can see some of the thread coming out of it. Also, just be aware that if you opt for suede in your shoe at all, especially where it runs down the heel, that will be hard for you to maintain. I wore this to a garden wedding and I had dirt stained up for the first 5 centimeters, and that suede just will never look the same, essentially. Guess like the Jimmy Choo sole. Finally, the sole is again that similar plastic look leather, which is a lot, from what I've been told, is a lot more hard wearing, but can be a bit slippery. So the last shoe at the end of the quality section is the Sophia Webster's. Now with these, they have some beautiful details on it, but in terms of quality, I do have a few issues with it. The first of all is that the wings are clad in some sort of rose gold metallic lining, and it scratches super easily. Now, for you to actually walk around in these heels, you have to walk with your legs slightly far apart. If you keep your legs close, like most ladies normally do, you just have your wings scratching and whacking each other constantly. Now, when you first wear them, you're going to make that mistake, for sure. It's just unusual to walk that way. And instantly, you will see a scratch on the wing. Now, I've tried to take a photo of it, but again, just like the patent leather, it's such a reflective surface. It's much harder for me to show it in a photo, although in real life, you would see it instantly. Of course, when people actually see you in these shoes at a distance, they will never pick that up. There is quite a lot of padding in the heel and the arch, but unfortunately that doesn't contribute to the comfort rating, which I mentioned earlier. What is also strange is I wore this for a 3-hour dinner, and you can already see that part of the sole has lifted, and I really don't know why that would happen. I wasn't doing anything intensive, and again, when you're paying that much for a shoe, you don't expect things like this to happen. Okay, part 3, sizing. Now, I made a mistake twice with getting my right shoe size, so I'm hoping there's one thing you learn from this video, it's that you get your correct size. It will save a lot of heartache, plus you don't have to do something super ugly, like me sticking in this shawl gel pad to try and make up for the wrong size. Now, I purchased all of my shoes as a 37 European. My whole life I've worn 37, so I just assumed it would be the same with designer brands. What I found though is that Sophia Webster's the easiest one, maybe because it's strappy, but it's basically true to size, no issue there. Otherwise, I would have gotten Jimmy Choo and Gianvito Rossi half a size down. I should have bought these as 36.5 instead of 37. These are just too large for me. On the other hand, Louboutin and Valentino have been very much a tight 37. You wouldn't want to go smaller than your average size. So if I walk you through this, I'll start with the mistakes that I made. The Jimmy Choo leather stretches a lot. I mentioned earlier, after 1 week of breaking into them, they were no longer tight, they were perfect. Another week after, they were too big. It is true that it's a narrow shoe. At the beginning, you really do feel very, very compressed. And so the mistake I made is that if you're buying a shoe that's largely covered, especially in leather, you need to get the shoe that is the smallest you can squeeze into. Don't get the shoe that's snug, because that's what I did here. I got the snug shoe and now it's loose. On the other hand, if you get the super tight shoe that you squeeze into, it is now the perfect size. Of course, there was a lot of pain, but at least you get the right size. Even before you own a pair of Louboutins, you've probably heard about how it's a narrow shoe. What I found is that it's definitely true. Now, I have to just step back here and say I don't really understand what a narrow foot looks like. I thought my feet were not fat, but I suppose because I do experience discomfort in terms of the width of the shoe, I must not be considered narrow. So the moment I tried these on in store, I had my 5 toes just competing and wrapping over each other like that. I just put up with it, and that's why it caused a lot of agony. Even now, after breaking into the shoe and wearing it for long events, between my 2 feet, my right toes, for some reason, are longer. So my left is fine, but my right, I've still got a bit of that bent overlap happening. And it's just something I just had to put up with. I of course could take a photo of that so you can see it clearly, but I want to keep this video aesthetically pleasing, so I won't show you what my bent toe looks like. But essentially, you know, like I've mentioned before, with these designer shoes, if you can sit down, take a breather for 5 to 10 minutes, take your feet out of these shoes, the pain will reset and you can tolerate still walking around in them, especially if you go for the platform. Now with the Gianvito Rossi, it's probably because of the PVC, which means it doesn't stretch, which is why from day one it just didn't fit. So how did I make this mistake? The reality is it's hard to buy nice goods in Sydney, Australia. So when I go overseas, I've already done all my research. I know what I'm looking for. And when I put on something I've thought about for a long time, which you probably do too, you'll be fantasizing. It's so gorgeous that when you see it on yourself, you can only think about how gorgeous it is. You don't stop to think about the pragmatics, like, does this shoe actually fit? So that's a big lesson I'd like to pass on. In regards to the pointed toes, which is the Valentino and the Gianvito Rossi, what's surprising is there's actually not any extra room in the front. You would think so, but there isn't. Your foot really does take up most of it, and it can actually be a little bit narrow on your pinky toe on the sides. I found that with both of the shoes, but it's not a deal breaker. It doesn't give me blisters, which I think is a general rule when you're wearing designer shoes. You just don't get them. So now we can talk about the fun stuff, which is the style. So if I start with my first shoe, my Jimmy Choo, out of all my 5 shoes, this is the only one that I don't get compliments for, often from complete strangers. Jimmy Choo branding is more subtle. I also went for a classic understated shoe that is not meant to be eye-catching. But for me, I feel like you can never go wrong with that nude in your closet. Also, if you go for patent leather, that shininess just keeps it looking really new. It makes it a bit more indestructible against evils like rain, clumsy waitresses. I actually had that happen with my Louboutin. I had a whole tray of drinks spilt onto my shoe, which luckily, because it was patent, no issue there. I also just want to add that a lot of people don't like the peep toe, but for me, especially in the right shoe design, I feel like it can elongate your legs. For a long time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to add Valentinos to the collection. Oh, sorry, not Valentinos, Louboutins. This is a very long video. Just because they're so infamously uncomfortable. Luckily, as I mentioned earlier, there's hope at the end of the tunnel if you opt for a platform. I feel like the platform really emphasizes even further how slender that heel is. And of course, this red backdrop just again is that wonderful contrast. It's similar to my Jimmy Choo in that it's such a classic design, classic color, understated, but because of that wow factor red highlight, everyone knows you're wearing a branded shoe. So if you're after recognition for your outfit, then you probably have to make this a staple. So the Valentinos are another very iconic, very well-known style, and they are the epitome if you are after something playful and fun. Now with these, because of how loud they are, I actually find them more limiting in terms of how you can wear them out. Generally, they look best when you go for basics elsewhere and you keep your clothes as simple and as effortless as possible, because otherwise it just feels like the shoe, which is a huge party on your feet, is trying to compete for attention with your jewelry, with your dress, and that's at the end of the day not a good looking outfit. Now of course, to make it easier to wear, you could opt for a more neutral tone like your whites, your nudes, your blacks. Then that gives you plenty more options. I decided, however, because it is one of the statements in my collection, that I'm going to go all out. I'm going to go with something as bright and as happy and loud as red. That's so that when I do manage to find the right outfit, it is as fun as you can imagine. In contrast to the peep toes of the Louboutin and the Jimmy Choo, the pointed toe is definitely significantly more dramatic and striking. You know already that I love these shoes, so I apologize if in this section especially I gush a lot about them. I love them for many reasons. The first being that even though this brand, Gianvito Rossi, is not well established in the Australian market, when you wear these shoes out, anyone can tell you're wearing a branded high-end designer shoe. And that's purely through the quality of the craftsmanship, the materials, and the unique design. If you're somebody who doesn't want to go mainstream, you don't want to be wearing another Louboutin, another Valentino, then these are a beautiful, unique shoe which will have a lot of people going, what brand is that? So you sort of have a unique identity. With the Plexi design, you can go for the same type of leather at the toe and the heel, but I decided to go all out, celebrate the materials here, and go for contrasting elements. So I've gone for a nude suede, the transparent PVC, which is default, and metallic gold in the front. The PVC is actually functional. It does wonders in terms of elongating your legs. So you can see that in these comparison photos. Like the Valentinos, it's got that beautiful, striking, dramatic heel. And I also feel like it's just a more timeless, understated, elegant look. I'm very concerned with my Sophia Websters and my Valentinos that in 5 to 10 years time, I can't really pull them off. But with these, I feel like I could be 40 or 50 and I could still wear them out. From a design perspective, I love how this shoe is so detailed, and it's purely through the structure and the materials. There is nothing superficial tacked onto this shoe. I feel like that's very pure, very clean. When we were in London, we were told that the Gianvito Rossis were one of 2 bestseller items. The other one being Sophia Webster. So with these heels, they are the epitome if you are after something playful and fun and youthful. They come in different color combinations. I originally tried it on as the black and teal butterfly wings. I found that one a little bit too heavy. I liked how this shoe color combination was lighter and it sort of floated on you because it was so similar to your skin tone. Like my Valentinos, I'm a little bit concerned that they are limited to particular age categories. Can I pull these off in 10 years? However, at the same time, J.K. Rowling wore these to one of her carpet events, so maybe I shouldn't think that way. It was my husband who fell in love with them for how romantic and feminine they were. And because I collect designer handbags, I know that one-off unique items can hold a lot of value over time. I am curious to see whether if Sophia Webster stops producing these shoes or has this collection but keeps reinventing them, hopefully specific items will grow in value and will be a worthy investment. So I'll keep an eye on that. Now we're up to the last section, which is all about costing. Of course, another really important factor in terms of your decision making. I just want to clarify that exactly how I purchased these shoes, secondhand, new, I'm going to tackle that in a separate video just because there's too much content in this one. Starting with the Jimmy Choos, I bought them online for 860 Australian dollars, including shipping from an American provider. In Sydney, this shoe retails for about the 930 mark, so it's a slight discount. I couldn't get the exact pricing because this style is now available in a new 2017 range and those prices are not released. The Valentinos are the only shoes I purchased secondhand mint condition. I got them from an American provider for 760 Australian dollars including shipping. Online, this retails new for about 1,300. So I was pretty happy with the savings I got on this one. With these 3 shoes, those 2 and that one, I got them all from London at the Harrods store. Converted from pounds, about 840 Australian dollars. This retails in Sydney for 1,195 and it retails online for about 1,100. for about 690 Australian dollars converted from pounds. This retails online for about $1,000, under 500 Australian dollars, and they retail online for about 770. So we are up to the final section. Maybe I've said final about 3 times now, which is summary and recommendations. I also want to say that if any of you are interested in the packaging that these shoes come in, I will tackle that in a separate video. For those of you who are wondering why do people even look at packaging, it's because if you want to buy secondhand, these are great ways for you to find out if your product is authentic or not. Plus, if you plan on reselling your shoe, packaging holds a lot of value and adds to the price you can ask for. So Jimmy Choo, to sum it up, I would say comfort. If you're worried about spending money on a shoe that you're gonna end up not wearing and not getting your money's worth, that will never happen to you if you invest in Jimmy Choos. Especially if you get it in a classic style, classic neutral tones. The fact that it's an easy to wear, comfortable shoe means that you can take it out to any occasion, any event. It becomes timeless. It doesn't matter if people see you in it 100 times. You will get your money's worth, and if you only need one pair of good shoes, make a Jimmy Choo. With Louboutin, I would say the word iconic, not just for the look, but also the fact that you've sort of entered a club by owning a pair. If you're a collector and you just want to add this and you don't mind it collecting dust, then go for it. If you actually want to get your money's worth out of this and you actually want to wear it, I would say go for the platform heel. Do not try to get this shoe without that, because without that I'm certain I would never wear it again. You know, black is a classic color. It can go with anything. It's fine if people see you in this shoe 100 times. If you only have one pair and it's Louboutin, that could work really well. With Valentino, the word I would use is statement piece. If you want something that's fun and loud and instantly recognizable, then these are sort of your shoes. If you want it to be more versatile, go for neutral tones, because otherwise a loud color like this is even more limiting. If you only own one pair of designer heels, I wouldn't recommend statement shoes like these, because when you wear something too much and it's too loud, people get sick of it, and it doesn't feel like you're reinventing your look. With Gianvito Rossi, my key word would be elegance. If you're after a great design and quality, but you don't want to go mainstream, then this is a real showstopper, and it's very unique as well. These are pretty easy to wear out, you know, casual or formal, and it can work as your only shoe if you want to wear it a lot. It's interesting because it's unique, but there's something also very timeless and classic about the silhouette. With Sophia Webster, I would again say statement, but these are really memorable and unique. If you like to be feminine and you want to be the center of attention, these are probably your shoes. They are challenging to wear out a lot because you don't want to bore people and always be seen in the same loud outfit that you can't really reinvent, but they are really fun and one of a kind. I would recommend you only get these shoes if you own more than one pair of designer items, because it can't work as your staple. So you will only really bring it out for that special little occasion a few times a year maximum. We're finally at the end of this super long video. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day and eat up quite a lot of your time. I'm really hoping that this video was useful to you, because I remember when I first transitioned over from my handbag collection to shoes, I found it hard to start. I was looking for videos especially about comfort, because I knew that if it wasn't comfortable, no matter how much I spent on it, I was not going to wear it. And so I've kind of come from that perspective when I try to compile this video feedback for anyone else out there who's interested. Now stay tuned. I can of course do more detailed videos about items related to shoes. I might add more shoes to my collection in the future, but I'm also thinking of starting to talk about my bags and my jewelry and my accessories. So if you're interested in those categories, then come back and visit my channel. And finally, I do have an Instagram account about my life and my collection, so if you're interested, have a look as well. Thanks!